The way that I did my first deal, I didn't have any money. I didn't have hardly any experience other than my sweat equity, right? That is 100% of the reason why I am where I am today.
What was the secret to being a great salesperson?
So it's not even really pitching something that you just want them to buy. You genuinely learn what they need.
Why would you say commercial is better than residential?
I would say the scalability. I like residential in some ways. I mean, it's a great first step. I mean, for a lot of people, I would say if it's between real estate and the stock market, go buy a single family home. I love industrial. I mean, industrial is our bread and butter right now. It can really, like as a real estate investor, it's the best thing that you could buy because you can service the widest array of potential tenants, which is, I mean, hey, money's money. I'll take it wherever it comes. All of the things that people do in residential real estate also work in commercial, but no one does them.
Welcome to the Better Life Podcast, where we talk about real estate investing, building wealth, and all in all, living a better life. My name is Brandon Turner, and I've spent my life investing in real estate to achieve financial freedom. We want to help you do the same. So on this show, you're going to hear from world-class guests who have been handpicked to help you level up your investing, your leadership, your goals, your habits, and more to become the very best version of yourself. So join us as we explore the habits, the actions, the beliefs that it takes to build wealth through real estate investing without losing your soul.
Tyler Cauble, welcome to the show, man.
Brandon Turner, excited to be here.
The bearded broker.
That's right, with Beardy Brandon.
That's right. For those who are listening and not watching, you don't realize that there's two of the most handsome men on the planet with the most handsome beards of all time.
That's it.
You know, part of the reason I grew this was because of you.
Was it?
Yeah, I thought you had a longer beard when I had a shorter one. I was like, that looks cool. So I went with it.
Well, it looks really good on you.
Thank you.
I think anybody that can grow a beard absolutely should try.
I agree. Men, women, doesn't matter. Everybody.
Especially women.
All right, so I know you. I've known you for years. In fact, years and years and years ago, I met you. I came to Nashville. I did, and I don't know if you hit me up or somebody did, but I came and spoke at your event. Do you remember that? Years ago.
Yeah. That was when I was a board member for the real estate investors in Nashville.
Yeah.
You came and talked. And
I don't remember a thing I said. No one does, but whatever.
But hey, we remember that you were there.
Yes, I was there.
That's all that matters.
That's when I met you. So we've hung out a number of times, Go Abundance and other things since then, but I know you as a commercial real estate guy, and I say commercial real estate guy because you do a lot of stuff in there. Investor, broker, developer, educator, you're the guy. I'm talking about commercial real estate that I know on the internet and in the world. I also know now that you are a farmer in that you have chickens and a farm. Does that make you a farmer? Do you have to grow crops to be a farmer?
I don't know.
I feel like if you own a farm, you're a farmer.
I feel like if you just have animals, you can just call yourself a farmer.
I think so too.
I'll have to look it up.
So we're gonna go with that. Farmer and woodworker, which is super cool, and I know that's a passion of yours. I'd actually love to maybe dig in that a little bit later on why you do that. But first, take me back. Who was Tyler Cauble before all that?
Man, before all of that, I was I guess I was in high school, graduated, and that summer I worked for a company called Cutco. Cutco Knives. You may be familiar with the knives.
We've had so many Cutco guys on this show. It's like a weird coincidence.
Yeah. Well, that's actually roundabout how you and I met was because of Hal Elrod.
Oh yeah.
And all of those guys, because I went to his Best Year Ever Blueprint event, then met Mike McCarthy, who took me to Go Abundance, and small worlds. But man, I didn't realize that sales was going to be my thing.
Yeah.
Right? I just knew that my neighbor next door, when I was growing up, sold my mom Cutco Knives, and he made $10,000 that summer. And I was like, man, I'm going to go out and make $10,000 that summer. Because I'd grown up doing construction every summer for my grandfather, and man, that's great work. That is tough work, working in the heat. So got into sales, broke every record in sales at Cutco that I could get my hands on. So fast start, I sold, I think $30,000 my first 10 days, sold $52,000 for the summer conference, and beat the record by like 20 grand. Ended up making over $30,000 that summer. So when I went to college, I was sitting in class learning the exact same things I had already learned in high school in 8th grade. I'm sitting in geology learning about pyroclastic flow. I'm like, man, I went more in depth in this in 8th grade. What am I doing here? And I started daydreaming, and I was like, okay, $30,000 in 3 months, is $120,000 a year.
Which when you're that age, that is $1 million.
Might as well be $1 million.
Yeah.
I'm dropping out right now. There's no point in me being in here. I'm going into sales. So much to the chagrin of my family, I dropped out after my freshman year and got into real estate. And that's all she wrote, man. I started off as a commercial real estate broker, learning the very base of how commercial real estate works, going out and finding tenants, which has been an incredibly helpful skill set to have. And back in, I guess it was 2013 when I first got started. 2019, I started buying my own buildings with investors. So,
all right, dude, there's a ton I want to unpack there. Let's start way back earlier, before we even get into real estate stuff. Cutco, what made you so good? Like, how were you good at sales? What was the secret to being a great salesperson?
Yeah, that's a great question. I used to get asked that a lot because the average Cutco rep sells $3,000 in their career, and I sold over $200,000 in about 20 months. And the thing that I really took away from learning from guys like Hal Elrod and some of the great people in sales of that company was just building relationships. That's all it was. It was building rapport. I mean, I would almost make it a competition with myself to see how long I could sit in Mrs. Jones's house and talk to her about anything but knives. And there were times where I'd be in there for 30, 40, 60 minutes before we even broached the concept of Cutco Knives. Which by the time that you have that level of rapport built, they trust you. And also I could learn more about their lifestyle and say, look, you don't need this. That's really not what you do. This is going to fit you more, and here's why. So it's not even really pitching something that you just want them to buy.
Yeah. You
genuinely learn what they need.
So you go from that into real estate. Like, after college, you get into real estate. 99% of people get into residential real estate when they get into it. They buy a house, they go house hack or whatever, and then maybe become a real estate agent for residential. Why commercial? Why is that where you end up? Was that just luck?
I just got a job offer.
Okay.
That's really it. It's very simple. And I didn't realize for probably 6 or 12 months how rare that is. Because now I know. Like, it's very difficult to get into commercial real estate. But I had sold Cutco Knives, of course, to a developer here in town for his beach house. And when I dropped out of college, I didn't really have any direction that I was going to go in. And he heard I was back in town. And he called me and he said, hey, I want you to come sell real estate for me. I'm going to give you a shopping center, an office building, and an industrial portfolio, and I want you to go out and lease it. And this was back in 2013, right? So we're still coming out of the Great Recession.
Yep.
Commercial real estate is way slower than residential. So, I was basically having to go and knock on doors and beg people to take space. And it was quite the experience, but ended up getting those spaces fully leased up. It was a lot of blocking and tackling, knocking on doors, sending out letters, cold calling. I did everything I could.
Well, what does that even mean? Because I'm not in the commercial world really at all, at least that side of things. I always assume they just call you, but you're out there trying to get somebody to come and rent a space. Wouldn't they already be looking? How does that work?
That's a great point. So there's a lot of brokers in commercial real estate that'll throw a sign up.
Yeah.
And they'll just sit back and wait.
That's usually what I see is a sign sitting in front of a building for a year or two.
But let's be real, that's the worst way to go about any business.
Yeah.
It's hope, right? And hope is not a strategy. So yes, of course, you put the sign up, you put it up online, but then you sit down and you come up with, and I think any real estate investor should do this with any property that they're buying. Who are the 10, 20, 30 most likely people to rent that space? And so we would look at the different spaces, the layouts, what they used to be, and say, okay, well, this one's kind of perfect for a dental office. Well, what is everything adjacent to a dental office, right? You got an orthodontist, you got surgery centers. There's so many different forms of dental offices. Well, then you can just start calling every single one in town saying, hey, you don't have a location in Hendersonville. You need to be in Hendersonville, and here's why. And I've got the perfect spot for you. And so
get them thinking oh yeah, that would be cool.
That's right, because you never know. They may have been thinking about going out and finding that space, but they haven't actually sat down to look at anything.
Yeah.
And you never know what you're going to come across.
And are you talking at that point? You're calling them. Are you talking to the owner? Are you talking to the secretary first, or the front desk? How are you getting through to somebody who's making a decision?
Yeah. So a lot of it is secretaries.
Okay.
And the assistants.
Yep.
And if you can build a good relationship with them, build good rapport, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, they will want to put it in front of their bosses, right? They're the gatekeeper. And I see too many times a lot of people in sales just try to get past that person or don't want to talk to them. It's a waste of time. Man, they hold the keys to the kingdom. So you treat them right, you crack a couple jokes with them, you leave them a flyer, they're probably going to give it to their boss. Whereas if you leave a poor impression, they're just going to throw it in the trash.
Yeah.
And so it worked more often than it didn't.
Yeah, that's cool. Were you mostly looking for people to expand their businesses and move in, or like move from their current place to another, or a little of both?
A little of both, right? Because I mean, especially when you're first getting started in real estate, you got to take the shotgun approach. You're going to send out anything to everyone just to try and make anything stick to the wall. And my first deal ended up being a relocation of a jewelry company that was down the street pretty much, but they were in 6,000 square feet. They wanted 2,500 square feet. And it was a great deal for them, a great deal for us, because their rent got cut basically by a third. They're pretty much still in the same area, and they get to continue operating.
What are some of the key differences between commercial real estate then and residential real estate in that regard? What else, that's obviously a big one is, they're commercial buildings. I mean, like commercial tenants, but what else do you see?
How much time do we have? So this is the story I usually tell when somebody asks me the difference between commercial and residential. When I first got into it, this was probably my first or second year, we had a residential agent in-house as well. He left, moved to California, but we were building a $1.2 million custom home. And somebody had to go and sell it. So the developer, my boss, looked at me and said, "You've got a real estate license, go sell this." So I would go out there every Saturday and Sunday and do an open house. And people say the craziest things, man. They'll walk into the house and just go, I just can't imagine my kids growing up in a house painted this color. And I'm looking at them, I'm like, this is the most common color in America right now. It's very easy. Most people like it. What color do you want it painted? I'll paint it myself. Yeah. No, it's okay. It's not for us. All right. So it's a very emotional decision.
Yeah.
It's a totally different kind of sales process. Whereas in commercial, it's very logical. Either the numbers work or they don't. And that comes down to traffic counts. That could be area median incomes. It could just be, is it a corner suite or not? And if you can check those boxes, usually you can get a deal done. So I just like operating that way more because to me, it's like, okay, I've got my criteria. I just have to find this. There's not really going to be a whole lot of emotion involved.
Yeah. So I've got a buddy who bought a strip mall down in like Florida, and it's got, I don't know, call it 30, 40 spots there, and immediately started having trouble with this thing because like tenants were moving out, and then what he didn't realize, and I didn't know this either because I'm not in that space, and is that he was telling me he has to pay for the improvements of the next tenant. How does that work? Because that's different than residential. I feel like we're not paying to, because there's no.
That's right.
Pay to fix a unit up, but we're not paying to move them in. What are you responsible for in that kind of a situation?
Yeah, so it depends on a case by case basis, but it's called a tenant improvement allowance.
Okay.
Right. So every business that's coming in, they have to make the space fit their business.
Yeah.
Right. Starbucks can't move into a Bongo Java, right, that's here in Nashville and just throw paint on the wall. They've got to completely retrofit it to make it fit for their criteria. And more often than not, they're going to try and put that on the landlord, which a lot of newer investors to commercial real estate look at that and they go, why would I want to pay every 5 years to just redo the space for a tenant? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, it's a tax write-off. Yeah, you don't want to spend the money, but you do get to depreciate the asset. But two, you can bake it back into the rent. So typically what we'll do is we'll take, if it's $100,000, we'll divide that out over 5 years and amortize it at 8% interest. And so I'm actually putting it back onto the tenant, but I'm covering it on the front end. So it actually benefits me a lot more because having a higher rent significantly increases the value of my property based on a cap rate, and I get the depreciation out of it. So it seems like a bad thing, but it's actually a pretty good thing.
Yeah. So my buddy, like in this area of Florida, it's like not like a small area, but it's not super big either. But tenants would leave, and then he can't get anybody to lease it out. The leasing agents, like I can't find anybody. Probably because they're doing the sign thing.
That's right.
So should he just be out there doing what you said, like getting a list of who's the top 20, 30 people that would be here, and then just pounding the pavement until he gets it filled?
He's got to get the right brokerage team involved. I mean, there are a lot of bigger groups out there that are great, right? But more often than not, they've got so many listings, they can't really spend the time going out and doing a shotgun approach, right? Which is why I love boutique commercial firms in any market that we're going to look at. Right, we're buying a deal in Chattanooga. I'm going to talk to all the boutique firms there. They're smaller. I know that their team takes more of the commissions home, so they're more bought in, and they're willing to go out and do that work. So it's that, and it could be, he's bought a property, right? So he could have inherited some issues that the previous owner really instituted, right? Those tenants could have left either way. He just happened to probably buy it at a wrong time.
Yeah, is that pretty common that somebody will sell a property and then the tenants leave right away, or is that due diligence usually figure that stuff out?
You usually figure that out in due diligence. So you'll have a rent roll, and you'll go through and you'll examine all of the leases.
Okay.
And we'll actually use that to determine the cap rate that we're going to buy the property at, right? So if somebody's trying to sell us a property at a 6% cap rate, okay, that's fine. But every single lease better be longer than 7 years. They better be, regional or national credit tenants, or at least heavily anchored by those.
And what does that mean, real quick? Regional or national credit?
Yeah, so like a regional credit tenant would be somebody that's got locations throughout the South or Southeast, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a mom and pop shop. They've probably got 10, 20, 50 locations, but they're not a huge national group, right? Yeah. And then you're going to look at your national credit tenants. That'd be like a Walgreens, right? Yeah. They've got locations all over the country. They're huge. You know that they've got really good credit. Chances are, even if they shut the store down, they're still going to have to keep paying rent. Yeah. And they know that.
When you say good credit also, are you referring to I know it's a term in the commercial world, but I've always wondered this. Are you referring to an actual credit, like the way that we would in hey, that credit score? Or is this just a term that just means, hey, they're dependable?
No. That's a good point. And I've never thought about that because I don't come from the residential world. But no, they're two completely different things. So we typically don't even look at the credit score of our tenants. Okay. It's all based on financials. And that's one of the other things that I love about commercial real estate compared to residential is, I can ask for your mother's blood type if I really wanted to. We get typically 3 years of financials, a personal financial statement from anybody that owns 10% or more of the business. We can get 3 to 6 months of bank statements or more if we need them. But we can do all of the due diligence that we need to on that tenant, on that business, to make sure that they are going to be the right one. And then we can actually, instead of just having the business sign on the lease, have the owners personally guarantee it. So even if the business shuts down, well, we spent all this money to build this space for you. You told us you were going to be here for 5 years. You have to keep paying rent, or you have to go find another tenant.
All right, before we move on, one thing we do on the show a little different is we give 100% of the ad revenue directly towards a charity of the guest choosing. So what breaks your heart, man? Where should we send the money from the show?
So I chose the Vanderbilt Children's Hospital.
Okay, why?
And that has a deep connection with me. When I was a freshman in high school, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
Ooh.
And we didn't know how long she had to live. But the thing that she always said to me, and she's better now. She's fully recovered. The prognosis was not good, and she's crushed it, man, and it's been amazing, and I'm grateful every day I get to see her.
Oh, God bless.
But throughout the entire time, she always talked about, it wasn't about herself. It wasn't about her trips to Vanderbilt to get chemo or whatever it was. It was always about the children at the Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. And, it's one thing for an adult to have to go through that. It's a completely different thing for kids. Yeah. So I've always loved Vandy, and hopefully one day I'll make enough money to where I can donate a whole bunch of money to the hospital and have a wing named after her.
I love it, man. Very, very cool. All right, well, this week's sponsor is...
Hey, quick story for you. About 5 years ago, I went to a real estate event where I met a handful of incredible investors. 2 of them in particular, though, changed my life. Those 2 investors were Brian Murray, Ryan Murdoch. They're now partners with me at Open Door Capital, where we bought over $1 billion worth of real estate. Not a bad ROI for an event, right? Now, why do I share that? Because it's one of the most underutilized tools for real estate investors, events. You can't put a price tag on the relationships you build, new business partners you meet, the knowledge you gain. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about Better Life's REI Summit that I'm personally hosting on May 3rd through May 5th in Denver, Colorado. I'll be there along with a number of other speakers that you might recognize, like Ken McElroy, David Green, AJ Osborne, Brian Murray, who I mentioned earlier, and more. The event's going to be the most actionable real estate event ever, with sessions being structured on a how-to basis, so you can walk away with actionable steps that you can actually implement in your business ASAP. Whether you're a new investor or a seasoned investor, the dual-track sessions ensure that you'll be in sessions relevant to your business and experience. If you're interested in learning more, check out reisummit2024.com. That's reisummit2024.com. Ticket prices are increasing soon, so register ASAP to lock in the lowest rate while you can.
Let's assume for a minute we're debating residential versus commercial. And so obviously there's a lot of nuances, and you could say it's better in some ways and other. But why would you say commercial is better than residential? Like, what's the argument for
I would say the scalability.
Okay.
Right off the bat, right? I can go out and buy a bunch of commercial buildings. Isn't there a limit in residential where you get to like 10 and then you have to start changing
it gets
up the way
kind of complicated,
right? So there's that. Obviously multifamily is commercial, right? So I could go buy 10 units and one location.
Yeah.
And so having that ability, instead of having to drive all around town to service your 10 units for a maintenance tech, you've got one location with 10 units in it. Makes it a lot easier. Sure, yes, it's going to be more expensive, right? That's always well, yeah, that's great, but it's more expensive. But you can raise capital for it, and you can get owner financing just like you can in residential. You can do sub-2 deals if you really wanted to in commercial real estate. It's more uncommon for sure, but you can get creative with commercial real estate too.
Yeah.
I like residential in some ways. I mean, it's a great first step. I mean, for a lot of people, I would say if you're gonna if it's between real estate and the stock market, go buy a single family home.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah. What kind of real estate then are you buying? Are you buying multifamily? Are you buying strip malls, office buildings? Like, what do you focus on?
Yeah, we actually don't have any multifamily.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily because I don't want any. I just haven't seen the value in it for the last few years.
Sure.
I think cap rates have been so low. And if you think about what's going on in our economic cycle, it was basically a little over 10 years ago when real estate syndications became a different beast, right? Because of under the Obama administration. So now we have 506B syndications. Well, over 10 years, a lot of these apartment complexes have been renovated 3, 4, 5 times. There's nothing really else to renovate. Cap rates are super low. Interest rates are kind of high. There's no juice left to squeeze.
Yep.
So I would love to get a multifamily deal, but really what we're buying today, I would buy an office building if it was the right deal. And I know a lot of people think that's crazy considering the office market. We love retail, especially if it's a grocery anchored shopping center, because we know that, people are typically going to a grocery store once a week, if not more. I love industrial. I mean, industrial is our bread and butter right now.
And what does that mean? What do you mean by industrial?
Like, we're actually in an industrial building right now, flex space,
Yeah.
right? So industrial could be anything from, a 10,000 square foot flex building with 4 tenants in it that each have a 200 square foot office and the rest of it's warehouse, all the way up to the 1 million square foot distribution centers that you see being built for Amazon. And everything kind of in between. And what I love about these flex buildings, like what we're in, I mean, you've got Goodwood next door, you've got some media companies, you've got a plumber, an electrician. It can really, like, as a real estate investor, it's the best thing that you could buy because you can service the widest array of potential tenants, which is, hey, money's money. I'll take it wherever it comes.
That's cool, man. So why are you okay with investing in office buildings? Yeah, who's going to an office anymore? We're all work from home. The world's changing. That's kind of the what everyone's saying.
So if you dig into the data, a lot of the office space that is struggling right now is closer to the downtown urban core.
Okay.
So a lot of suburban offices are okay. And when you start to think about that, it's because the boss lives in the suburbs. So he still wants to go to the office. Some people still want to go to the office. Fine. Office is changing. I mean, that's for sure, right? But if you look at every other asset class, retail has changed, industrial has changed, multifamily has changed night and day. I mean, you look at 1980s product compared to what's being built today, it's a totally different beast. Office hasn't done that. It's kind of stuck in the 1980s, and it deserves to change. So it just happened to hit it at a time where we basically accelerated 5 years in advance in 1 year. But we did a project in 2019. It was a small 2-story, 12,000 square foot office building. That was in a submarket where I knew the upstairs unit, which was 6,000 square feet. It was one office suite. I was like, there's no way anybody's ever going to lease this. What can we do with it? So it was already, kind of subdivided almost into 12 smaller suites. So we looked at that and said, okay, we've got 5 suites downstairs. We've got 12 potentially up here if we just do a little bit of renovation. And so we retrofitted the building to do basically smaller private office suites. I mean, we're talking 200, 250 square feet up to 500 square feet of the biggest. And delivered it in January of 2020, which sounds like it would have been the worst timing ever. Except that small business owners don't like to work from home. I've been stuck from home this week working because of these snowstorms here in Nashville. And my dogs are jumping all over me. They are losing their minds. They can't believe that I'm still there. So it distracts me. It's annoying. I love getting out and going to the office. We signed 17 leases on that office building in the height of COVID from between March of 2020 to September of 2020, 17 leases. And I sold it in October. I mean, crushed it. So deals like that, which is a little atypical from your typical office, right? I love, and I think that they work.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, we had an office out in Maui, with Alex kind of led the charge on it. We didn't buy it, we rented it. But we had a hard time finding a place, first of all. We couldn't find almost any good office that was even remotely attractive. I mean, it was pipes hanging down from the ceiling and dead body in the corner. And it's like, hey, there you go, for $8,000 a month, you can have that. And we're just like, this is crazy. So we found a halfway decent one, right?
I love our office.
I do too. Then we remodeled it.
But we moved in. It was beige, gray, terrible walls,
Yeah.
fluorescent lighting, carpet. It was awful. It hadn't been touched in, and they were asking all the money.
Yep.
But I think remote work is absolutely crazy. I don't
Yeah.
know why people like it. Especially, I mean, I get if you don't actually want to go to work, remote work is great.
Oh, dude,
If you don't want to work, then remote work is great.
That's
If you
the
want
quote of the day.
if you want to work, going to a place and having camaraderie and solving problems together is like the way.
I'm my own boss, and I can't keep myself motivated
Yeah, I know,
to
at
work
home,
from
yeah.
home, right? So, but y'all's experience is not uncommon.
Yeah.
I mean, in that submarket where I did that office building, everything else was 1980s vintage.
Yep.
The carpet hadn't been changed out in years, and they were still leasing them out because it was the only product. So I was like, man, if we just paint the walls, put new flooring down, and put LED lighting in, we are going to be the belle of the ball. Everybody's going to want to dance with us.
That's exactly the theory I had, and I've not played with this, and I'm not in the space. But it's like you're flipping houses in a world where every single house is nasty, and you're the only one flipping houses, like making them look good. It's like people, of course, want I think there's like this. I thought that business owners don't care about that, but people forget businesses don't care about looks, but it's like the business owner does, and his wife does. Like that they do care, and so I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for buying those 1980s style properties, making them actually look good, and then leasing them out to people or just selling them entirely.
I completely agree. I mean, you really want to aim to try and have them within neighborhoods, right? Because your most likely tenant is going to come from that neighborhood. Because, I mean, think about it. We're moving to a hub and spoke system. People don't want to go downtown anymore.
Yes.
They want to have everything that they need in their little node, right? I mean, we're in East Nashville right now. My running joke about East Nashville is we never cross the river. Like, we try and stay in our own little bubble, and we've got everything that we need over here. And it's nice, So I think a lot of people want to live that way, especially in cities like Nashville, where we don't have mass transit. It is unknown if we will ever have mass transit, and traffic just keeps getting worse because everybody wants to move here.
Yeah. We almost built a co-working center in Maui because we don't have one in our area at all. Period. There's no good. I mean, there's kind of a small little one, ugly 1980s looking, very different. Not like the modern co-working. So we almost built. We had some of the plans done. We had the property picked out, everything. At the end of the day, though, I got cold feet. Is that the right phrase? Like I got nervous because I'm like, if this was my money. Because it doesn't exist already, it's kind of a risk. Can I get 100 people to pay whatever, a couple $100s a month, whatever it ends up being for a co-working center? And I didn't know it. And I didn't want to put my investors' money at risk. If it was mine, I would have done it. But I love the idea of this, of office, of bringing people together to work somewhere cool. So
I think that's fair. I mean, we did a video on my YouTube channel on Very Space down in Dallas. You should check them out.
Okay.
So Very made the Very desk, right? The little stand-up desk, the original one.
Yep.
Then they kind of evolved into, well, if we're changing the way the office works, let's take that into the physical world. And so they bought an old campus. I can't remember which company it was, but 400,000 square feet in Dallas. And they made it 100,000 square feet of amenities. So, you've got a cafeteria, which is actually a really nice cafeteria. They've got a 10 or 15,000 square foot gym. They've got all these cool little nooks and hangout areas and gaming areas, and so that you don't have to necessarily work in your office. You've also got all of this other stuff, and it also, the companies that were leasing there were companies that wanted their employees interacting with employees from other companies. So it was a very intentional approach to the office environment, and it was one of those places where I was like, I would love to work here. I mean, if we were in Dallas, this is where my team would be. Because it was so cool.
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, I definitely want to revisit this idea of the co-working eventually. I want to get through. I want more of my own cash, and I want interest rates hopefully a little better before we pursue that. But because it's risk. Development is risk.
It's always a risk.
When it's a risk for a new thing I'm not into, I'm like, well, I got to bring in partners then who have the development risk, or can reduce the risk because they've got experience. So,
well, there's a couple ways you can mitigate that. I mean, one, I would look at possibly breaking it up and not saying, okay, this co-working space needs to be 100% office. Find 4 or 5 retail tenants that would be awesome amenities for the office users as well as the surrounding neighborhood, those 4 or 5 people will pre-sign leases before you even break ground.
That's cool.
So going into it, okay, well, we've got the retail base. Then you can go out to all of the office users and say, hey, check out how awesome this office campus is going to be. Here's all of your amenities. Here's the discounts. So we've already pre-negotiated with all of these tenants for you since you're going to be in the co-working space. And there's ways to mitigate it.
That's awesome. I never even thought about that. Yeah, this is why I didn't pursue it, because I know I'm not an expert yet, and I don't like to pursue things that I'm not like real good at, but I'm coming back to it at some point. All right, man, let's talk a little bit about the wash.
Yeah.
What is the wash?
Oh man, the wash is my baby. So it is my COVID baby, actually. So it's a 6-bay car wash that we converted into 5 micro restaurants and a bar.
Wow.
So each of the restaurants is about 400 square feet, and that is including the walk-in cooler. So there is no seating inside. I mean, it is walk-up counter service, and we've got about 80 seats outside. There is some seating inside of the bar, but I came up with it during COVID because our brokerage kept getting calls from restaurants, which I know is kind of surprising, but they were all saying, we want to lease a restaurant space to focus on to-go and delivery. We don't want any seating. Yeah. We don't want any interior space. We want it to be all kitchen. Well, I kept having to tell them, I'm sorry, that does not exist, especially in Nashville. It might in New York City or LA. That does not exist in Nashville. And my property management company had been working on this car wash for a little while because the owner was going to convert it into Airbnbs. Of course, when COVID hit, completely put that plan on pause. And I was driving past the car wash one day, literally hanging up from having a conversation with a restaurant group about, sorry, that doesn't exist. We'll call you if we find anything. And I looked at the car wash. I was like, those are 6 bays. What if we kind of made them ghost kitchens? Right? Because ghost kitchens were all the craze back then.
Yep.
And then the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, well, they would kind of be retail-facing ghost kitchens because this is a major corridor. And, what would that look like? I guess we could have some outdoor seating. So I called my architect and I said, hey, this might be a totally crazy idea to turn a car wash into a, basically food hall, outdoor food hall. Yeah. So, hang up on me if you think it is, but what are your thoughts? And he was like, I think we could do that. So we got to work. It took, we bought it in December of 2020. We didn't deliver it until April of 21. And we had all 6 leases signed within 2 weeks of announcing the project.
Wow.
Just announcing it. We hadn't even broken ground, done anything on it yet. Because what we realized is that because the spaces are inherently small, and this is kind of what I was talking about with office space earlier, go for the smaller spaces. Yeah. They don't have to be massive. Because they're small, even if we're charging a higher price per square foot on the rent, it's still affordable on a monthly basis. So when we were initially going through ideas for tenants, we thought, let's grab all the big Nashville brands that don't have a presence in East Nashville. That would be so cool. We can kind of create this really, unique thing. But the more that we ideated on that, we're like, but they can afford this. Mm-hmm. They can already afford to go do all of this. Why do we need to give them this affordable opportunity? And so we said, you know what? We're going to go with businesses that are either startups, have food trucks, or are doing pop-ups. And that's it. And we ended up signing, I think only one of them had a previous location. The other ones were doing pop-ups. All of the businesses were either woman or minority owned, which we were not intentional about, but awesome to see that when given the chance, it happened.
Yep.
And, my office is immediately next door. So selfishly, you kind of pick the places you want to eat at every day. So I have to say the food is amazing. I eat there at least once a day. But it was a lot of fun. It's been a fun project.
What's the best food you think there? What's your favorite thing?
Oh, gosh, I can't even say that. I hope.
What is one amazing item of food that you recently ate there?
Okay, so the thing that I've been eating the most here recently is the super quesadilla from Suiza. So Nashville is not really known for its quesadillas,
sure,
right? But this group, we've actually done a couple of concepts with them. They came from California, where you've got the super burritos, right, which are a totally different beast, and they brought that concept into quesadillas, and I can't eat enough of them, man. But everything there is so good.
That's awesome, man. Can you explain what a ghost kitchen is, and then I'd love to talk about your thoughts on where's that headed? Where's that industry headed?
Ooh, yeah, I think that's going to continue to be a big thing.
Yeah, what is it for that? For
Yeah, so ghost kitchens are essentially ghost kitchens, right? So it's a kitchen that does not have a retail front, right? So it might actually be like there's one here in East Nashville that's in the basement of a building. It's, of course, everything's to code, right?
Yep.
Like I know when you say it's in the basement, it kind of sounds weird. Everything's to code, but it doesn't have a face. Right, so you don't actually go to that location. You just order delivery from there.
Yeah.
So it's all to go or delivery, and it's a lot cheaper for the restaurant groups to do, right? Because they don't have to worry about paying retail prices on the restaurant. They don't have to staff it with as many people. They don't have to pay rent on empty chairs, which a lot of restaurants are doing a lot of the time. And it's also just a great way to start up your restaurant idea.
Yeah.
There's a lot of groups that get started out of a ghost kitchen. Because it's not cost prohibitive, which is pretty cool. So
and you can test the menu. You can see what people like. What are people going to eat? Order what they aren't. You can change it weekly.
Exactly.
Just order it on DoorDash or Uber Eats or whatever. Right?
That's what Mr. Beast does.
Yeah.
I mean, all of his concepts are ghost kitchens,
Yeah.
right? You're never gonna. I mean, you don't say never,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you probably haven't gone to a physical location to
Yeah.
buy a Mr. Beast burger.
Yeah, I think he's got one, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, I think Red Robin produces a lot of his.
Really?
Yeah. I think Red Robin is like, yeah, because I looked it up once, and I've done it a couple times actually in a couple cities. Because sometimes they'll have the address, and you go look it up. I'm like, that's the same address as Red Robin.
That's
So
funny.
it's like, yeah, he and it's not just Red Robin. Other people do that. He just gives the recipe, and then they make
Right.
the food. It was actually a pretty brilliant move on his part.
Because you can
scale.
scale without having to worry about all the
Exactly.
infrastructure.
Yeah, he opened 500 restaurants in a day or something like that. Like, how can you do that?
That's a YouTube video right there.
Yeah, it was absolutely nuts. So.
Yeah, I mean it's really neat, and the funny thing is too, like a lot of people don't realize this. Your favorite brands, Starbucks,
Yeah.
Dunkin' Donuts, they all use Ghost Kitchen.
Yeah.
So if you're ordering them through Uber Eats, it's not like they're making it in the location down the street. They have a Ghost Kitchen that specifically handles the orders for that because now
Really?
it's become such a big thing.
I didn't know. I went to a Chick-fil-A the other day, and I walked up and I took the kids and the wife. We were going to go in the Chick-fil-A, and there was nowhere to go. And it wasn't a ghost kitchen per se. They did have a front thing, but you couldn't eat inside. Like, there was nowhere to eat. And I was like, this is the weirdest Chick-fil-A ever. And then they had a whole door just for the drivers, like DoorDash
Yep.
and Uber Eats. And it was designed 100% for those people, or 99% for those people.
It's funny, and they'll put them like
so
in
weird.
business districts.
Yeah.
Because they know people are going to want to order Chick-fil-A for
Oh,
lunch.
Yeah, that's where it was. It
Yep.
was like downtown Nashville. Wild, man. So do you see that increasing? Was this just a COVID thing? People stopped going to restaurants and that's going to fade out? Or where do you see the idea of the delivery food thing going?
I think it's going to continue to grow. I love that it's a thing.
Yeah.
Because opening up a restaurant is one of the most cost prohibitive
Yep.
businesses that you could ever get into, right? I mean, that was the thing that we talked about a lot with the Wash was the most amazing chefs will never serve their menu to anyone because they're great at being chefs, but if you want to open a restaurant, you got to know how to raise capital.
Yeah.
I mean, we struggle with that in real estate, and we listen to people talk
Yeah.
about it all day,
Yeah.
right? You got to know how to manage people, how to hire people, how to deal with all of the bills and the bookkeeping and all that kind of stuff. It's a totally different thing. So I think that it's giving people that next step, right? It's like co-working for restaurants.
Yeah.
I mean, it just gives you that first baby step to get out of your house
Yeah.
instead of having to go from a house to a 5,000 square foot restaurant with 50 employees and $100,000 a month in rent to, hey, you get to work out of a ghost kitchen.
Yeah, it's super cool. There's a concept we talk about in business a lot of like the lean startup.
Oh, yeah.
In that book, The Lean Startup, it's all about like how can you do the minimal viable product, the simplest way to test your idea to see if people bite and see what they bite on, and then you can expand from there. Instead of saying, I'm going to go build this business for the next 9 months and see. So ghost kitchens allow restaurants to do a lean startup model, which is just brilliant. So yeah, I'm excited to see where that kind of heads. And I think as autonomous vehicles become more and more acceptable and normal, and we start having I feel bad for all the drivers of DoorDash and but those guys, their days are numbered. Like, that job won't be around for much longer. But when the delivery cars can just keep food warm and just run automatically all the time, they pull up to the building, like, it's going to be wild.
I'm just picturing in my head a Tesla pulling up to that Chick-fil-A,
Yep,
and they're just
they
like
set it
throwing
there.
a bag in
Yep.
there.
It's 100% going to happen
Yeah.
within a few years. If it hasn't already, it's probably already happened in Silicon Valley. I don't know, but yeah, that's going to change things a little bit too in terms of one, you could probably travel further if you're in a vehicle, especially designed specifically for that, right? So imagine a van, Tesla van comes over and they've got 50 bays in there that all keep everything warm, and the thing pops open, the Red Robin puts the burger in there, it shuts and dries it, and it keeps it warm, the perfect temperature the whole way. Gets to your house, they're like, hey, it's out front. You go out there, open it up your door, and then drive off. Like, that's a business right there.
Yeah, it's like those mobile lockers.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
where you
It's
drop your suitcase in or whatever.
Yeah.
Except for this one, the van opens and
Yeah.
you've got the key code to your,
Yeah,
to your lunch.
Dude, that's an idea for just making that van. Like, that's just a retrofit a van into doing that. I wonder if anybody's come up with that yet.
I haven't seen anything.
I haven't either.
Maybe you shouldn't air this podcast.
Yeah. 'Cause even if you just had a normal driver, but the driver's job was just somebody park in front of the house and you walk out and grab your food. It's an interesting idea. Huh, maybe I'll play with that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go back to commercial investing a little bit. I would love to give our audience just they want to invest in commercial real estate. They hear that's a good thing. So they've got some money. They're saying, I want to invest in it. Let's talk like step by step how to do that. First step, do I find a broker? Do I find a deal? Do I go off market, on market? Like, what do I do to find a deal? Is that the first step even?
Finding a deal is definitely not the first step.
Okay,
so
let's-
I would
let's-
say learn.
Okay.
First step is education.
Okay.
Right. You know, I hear from people, real estate investors all the time, like, I just don't know where to get started in real estate. I was like,
Yep.
well, yeah, or in commercial real estate. But when you first got started in real estate, you didn't either.
Yeah.
You listened to Bigger Pockets.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
listened to Brandon Turner for 1,000 episodes, right?
So sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the same thing, right? You
Yeah.
just got to get out there, listen to the podcast, watch the YouTube videos, read the books, go to some commercial real estate events, right? And just meet people in the industry. It's the same as in residential, right? You kind of got to go back to that step one. From there, you'll build the contacts.
Yeah.
And then it depends on what kind of real estate investing that you want to do. If you've got a lot of money, then you probably want to, but you don't have a lot of time, you probably want to take the single tenant or triple net lease route, right?
Okay, explain that.
So a triple net lease is a lease structure within commercial real estate. There's a bunch of different ones where the tenants are responsible for their pro rata share of the common area maintenance, the property taxes, and the building insurance. So, in multifamily or residential, you as the landlord are actually responsible for all of those.
Yeah.
If your property taxes or insurance goes up, like your buddy's shopping center in Florida is probably
Yes.
got some insane insurance right now.
Yep.
If that goes up, you as the landlord in residential or multifamily, that comes out of your profit.
Yeah.
Whereas in commercial, that expense gets passed on pro rata to my tenants. Sorry guys, taxes went up this year. If y'all want to appeal it, you can, but it's pretty cut and dry.
What's the risk of triple net lease properties? Like, you go buy a single tenant triple net lease, let's say. What's the risk there? And two, it sounds almost too good to be true. So what's the downside?
Yeah. So the risk is you're not just buying the real estate, you're buying the lease.
Okay.
And the tenant is the one guaranteeing the lease. So you have to really dive into and make sure that you understand that tenant's credit, their viability as a business, what they're doing. That's why like Walgreens and Starbucks are such popular, single tenant net lease investments, because everybody knows Starbucks and Walgreens are doing fine.
Yeah.
For the most part. And they also buy really good locations, or they lease in really good locations.
Yep.
So even if Starbucks or Walgreens moves out, chances are good you're going to find a great tenant that wants to move in there. So the other risk you have is it's a single tenant, right? If they disappear, 100% of your rent is gone. But that's where it comes down to due diligence and making sure that you're doing the right thing on the front end. We've got a lot of clients that have done some very successful single tenant net lease deals, but it's a lot of front end work.
Yeah.
And then from there, you as the landlord don't really have any responsibility. I mean, it's making sure that the check's coming every month. And I would say also getting out there and checking on the property once or twice a year, making sure that the tenants are doing some of the work that they need to be doing. Because a single tenant net lease is often structured a little bit differently from a triple net lease where there's only one tenant. So they are solely responsible for actually doing all of the work on the property. And, you might be thinking, why would a tenant want to do that?
Yep.
Well, Starbucks has a very specific brand and a brand image that they have to maintain. They're not going to deal with 10,000 landlords who have 10,000 different opinions on how, landscaping should be done. They know this is how we like to do landscaping, so we're going to take care of it. So, and there's many brands that feel the exact same way. Triple net is typically you'll have 2 or 3 tenants, and so you won't be able to just pass everything off to one. And they actually tend to like the triple net structure as well. You do have to educate tenants on this more often than not if you're dealing with mom and pops, which can be frustrating because they don't get it. They're like, well, hold on, I'm paying $25 in rent, but now I'm having to pay $5 more in rent. It's like, well, yeah, you would be paying $30 in rent if this was a full service lease. And in fact, I'd probably be charging you $32 or $35 a foot if it was full service, just to take into the account the risk. But since I'm being very transparent with you about what the costs are to run the property, I'm just going to charge you a base rent. And so your base rent will go up every year. But this, your triple net expenses, that will go up as it comes.
Yeah, that's smart. Do you need a property manager with triple net lease then? If you're just having a triple net, why would I need a property manager, or would I?
Yeah, so it depends on the property, right? Okay. And I know everybody loves that answer in real estate. It's like, it depends. Everything depends. It really does depend on the property. So like with a single tenant net lease, probably not unless you have 10 or 20 of them, and at which point you might want to look at getting an asset manager, right? Which is kind of the same thing. So they're not necessarily going to have to manage the properties, but you do want somebody that's handling tenant relations, that is making sure rent's being paid on time, that property taxes and insurance and all of that are getting paid properly. It does become, a burden at some point. On a triple net lease though, you're probably going to want a property manager, right? Okay. Because you are still, even though the tenants are paying for their pro rata share of everything, you as the landlord are actually still responsible for executing on that.
Okay.
So if you have a landscaper, or if you have, a maintenance crew that has to go out and change light bulbs in the parking lot, you still have to deal with all of that. So you want to make sure it's being done properly with a property manager.
Okay, that makes sense. What do loans look like on a thing like on a property like this? Like, how's financing work?
Very different from multifamily. Okay. Multifamily is so easy to finance compared to pretty much anything else. So commercial, really before, I guess, September of 22, you were looking at 20 to 25% down.
Okay.
And then, interest rates were kind of in that 4.5% to 5.5% range. Now you're probably looking at 30 to 40% down, and your interest rates are somewhere between 7 and 8%, give or take, depending on your credibility, depending on your financials.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can get them to where you don't have to personally guarantee it, right? Everybody wants to stay away from the PG. That's why multifamily is nice. You don't have to do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But more often than not, you're probably going to be signing a personal guarantee. So as long as you can get comfortable with the tenants, we don't really mind it. It's just part of it. And if you're doing a multi-tenant situation, the chances of you ever getting into a bind where majority of your tenants aren't paying rent, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I got to sign personal guarantees on almost all the mobile home parks that I buy. Not all of them, but most of them. It's just part of the game. It's more commercial financing. It's probably more similar to that. So we're typically putting down, not that we have to, but we typically put down 50 to 55% now on a lot of deals. And it's kind of the only way to make them cash flow when you're paying 7 or 8% interest. So,
well, let's talk about that some more. Yeah. Because I know this is your podcast. So
please, man, it's your podcast today. I love it.
It's funny. The older I get and the more experience I have in real estate, the more I'm like, 50% down looks really attractive.
I know, right? Me too. I know, dude. It's like I used to want to maximize everything and be 99% in. Like 1% down, 0% down, 5%. Everything was maximized. Now I'm like, I don't like risk as much. I got other people's money involved. I take less return for less risk at this point in my career.
Yeah, to me, the return on equity doesn't necessarily matter.
Yeah.
As long as it's a good deal, it's cash flowing right. We used to be like, let's go to the moon. Yep. Let's leverage this as much as we possibly can. And now I'm starting to look at some aspects of my business. We're going to start building residential homes, which is something that my first project was in 2017. We built 42 townhomes. And after that, I got completely into commercial. And I was like, I'm just going to buy commercial real estate.
Yeah.
But now I'm looking back on it, and I'm like, man, we should keep doing that. But instead of, getting a massive loan, bringing in a bunch of investors, I'm just doing that all cash. And there's a lot of people that would say, but you're missing out on the potential returns. Maybe I am. But I can go out and buy a lot, pay cash for it, ride out the wave, let it appreciate. Then I can pay cash to build the house. Then I don't have to do anything according to anybody else. And maybe that's just one side of my business.
Yep.
But I know that if I ever get into a bind, it's fine. It's a bank account. I'll sell it and we'll move on.
Yep. Yeah, I love the idea. I don't flip houses, but if I did, at this point in the market with interest rates where they are, there's a good chance I'd be putting, aim for 100% down on the entire purchase and rehab. And if I didn't have that money, I would raise the money, but I'd raise 100% of the money from equity investors. Some people put it in. So it's still like there's no loan. I love the idea right now in a riskier market where we're not sure where things are headed. I like the idea of saying, I got no risk in this. Like worst case scenario, okay, we rent it out. We make cash flow because there's no debt. So it's going to cash flow. And if 2 years from now, 5 years from now, whenever interest rates come down, okay, fine. Maybe then we'll refinance it to a more reasonable number and get a 30-year fixed 5%. Great. Now I've de-risked. I've waited. But yeah, I like that idea of holding a little bit more equity at this point.
Why do you think people get so fixated on leveraging to the gills?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Some is because they have to, probably, because they just don't have any money. I think that's a big piece. But again, I would rather than bring in more partners, have less of a share, but do more deals with less risk. I think there's some of that. If I got $100,000, I can put 20% down on 5 different deals, or I can do one deal. They're just thinking volume. Like I'd rather have more volume, which may or may not be the answer either. But
I think when you're first getting started, there's definitely something to be said about that.
Yeah.
But once you've made enough to just pay cash for one deal,
yeah.
I don't know. It's just so much more attractive.
Yeah.
I'm looking at these homes and I'm like, okay, I can go and syndicate another $5 or $10 million deal.
Yep.
Or I could pay cash, build these homes, and if I do 2 or 3 of those a year, I'm going to make as much money as I did syndicating a $5 or $10 million deal.
Yeah.
And I don't have to deal with investors, and I don't have to deal with a bank, and I don't have to, lose sleep at night. So it's interesting. I mean, I was hardcore syndication for the from 2019 to 2023, 22. So like 3 years, basically, we ended up acquiring over $50 million in assets, which is not a huge amount, but it's not a small amount either.
That's a good amount.
And, now I'm looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, it's, because we're kind of starting to come full cycle on some of these deals.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, the amount of work that I had to put into that, I don't know if it was worth it. I made the investors a lot of money. They're very happy.
Yeah, investors make a lot of money. I know. I look at it too. I'm like, man, I'm glad my investors make money.
Yeah.
But I'm like, yeah, could I have made the same? Probably. The one argument I have for the syndication is it's allowed me to build a bigger team around it, and I like having a team. And I like helping other people build wealth. That's great. But yeah, in terms of actual amount of money that I'll make, could I have made more on my own? Maybe. I don't know. Hard to say.
Yeah.
But
it's fun to think about.
It's fun to think about, man. All right, so let's go back to I want to buy a property. So I've educated myself. I know what I want to buy. I want to buy a small strip mall, I don't know, whatever, 10 to 20 tenants, some kind of nice anchor tenant in there. Now do I go find a broker? Can I do this off market? Should I pursue both things?
Yeah, you could do both.
Okay.
So, I mean, hopefully in your time of learning, you might have gone to some real estate events. You could have made a couple of contacts, met some people, and you could even find a potential partner there.
Yeah.
The way that I did my first deal, I didn't have any money. I didn't have hardly any experience other than my sweat equity, right? So I learned exactly what this developer wanted. I went out and found it and pitched it to him. And I said, hey, I've got this piece of land. We can build 57 townhomes on it. Let's do a deal. And they said, okay, that's a pretty good deal for what I think we got the land for like $1 million. It means nothing for 57 units. And they gave me 10% for finding the deal. But then I had to continue working on it. So I actually got the project management experience as well. So I really got to learn everything about the development side of things. I only got 10%. And a lot of people would look at that and go, oh, 10%? I wouldn't do that for 10%. Yeah. But I got 2 years of real estate development experience. I got to work on a 42-unit townhome. That is 100% of the reason why I am where I am today.
100%.
Because I got all of the education.
Yep.
So, I get pitched all the time like, hey, I want to partner with you on this. I don't have any money, but I want 50%. I'm not going to do that.
Yep.
It's just not going to happen. I mean, 10 to 20%, probably, depending on how good of a deal it is. So you could find a partner that way. But yeah, I mean, talk to brokers. Talk to every broker that you can. Build a relationship with them. Commercial real estate is very finicky, right? A lot of these commercial real estate brokers, they're not like your residential agents that you're used to dealing with. They will blow you off or they will never return your phone calls. They need to know that you're a really serious buyer. So, typically what I recommend is go out, meet them face to face, buy them lunch, right? Then follow up with them every 3 weeks from then on out. Whether that's a text message, an email, a phone call, another in-person meeting, doesn't matter. Stay top of mind because I promise you their other clients are not doing that. Yeah. And come up with a very specific buy box. Don't just go to them and say, hey, I want to buy a shopping center. Kind of like what you said earlier.
Yeah.
I want to buy a 10 to 20 unit shopping center that's between $2 and $4 million within a 50-mile radius of here, and call me, right? Because as a broker, I'm dealing with a lot of people calling me all the time, like, hey, I want to buy this, I want to buy this. And I'm trying to figure out who is legit and who's not.
Yeah.
The person that comes to me and says, this is exactly what I want, I know, okay, they probably know what they're doing. And the thing is, somebody could come to me and say, I want to buy anything between 2 and 4 million. And then they could come to me and say, I want to buy 10 to 20 units between 2 and 4 million, you know, et cetera, et cetera. If I get a $3 million shopping center, I'm calling the person that told me exactly what they wanted. I'm not calling the person that just said, I'll buy anything between 2 and 4 million.
Yeah.
So building a
point.
relationship with them is very important. It's just a kind of a different game.
Yeah, solid point, man. All right, so once you buy that property, once you start shopping for a property, is it pretty similar to residential where you go look at it, you make an offer, you analyze the deal, you know, run the numbers? Are we back to kind of normal real estate at that point?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. I mean, the buying process is very similar. It's just a little more intensive.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, once you go out and tour the space, there's a lot of things that you won't see when you're there. Right. I mean, it's a shopping center or an office building or industrial, whatever. A lot of it's going to come down to the lease. Right. Every lease is different. There are no leases that are the same, because every landlord has a different opinion on how their leases should be structured. And then every property is different, right? So the 3-tenant strip center next door is going to have a very different, you know, lease structure than the 4-tenant strip center next door. Yeah. So it's very important for you to dive into that. Make sure you've got a commercial real estate attorney, not an attorney, a commercial real estate attorney. Make sure that you've got a really good broker that knows what they're doing. I would already be talking to banks before you're even going out and seeing properties.
Did you get pre-approved? Is that a thing like it is in residential?
Yes and no. It's not the same as in residential where you get like a pre-approval letter and, you know, everybody feels good about it. It's more of, you know, you want to start building a relationship with bankers just the same way you are with brokers.
Okay, yeah.
So that, you know, by the time that the purchase comes around, that banker who you are submitting all the documents to knows enough about you. They've got a good enough relationship to where they can go into their committee, right? Because it's very different than residential real estate. Yeah. These commercial real estate brokers go into a board meeting and they are pitching you and your deal to a group of people who have never met you before. So you want to make sure you've got a really good lender or banker and that you've got a really good relationship with them and that they know you and your story.
Yeah. Smart, man.
So make it easy on them.
All right. I love it. Then you close the deal. You maybe have a property manager, and you start making money. How much money can you make from a commercial deal? I mean, is this?
How much money do you want to make?
I mean, like, so in residential, you know, we look at like, hey, I'm, you know, obviously this changes all the time. Interest rates are making things really hard right now, but I always shoot for somewhere around like 5 to 10%, maybe 12% cash on cash return on a really, really, really good deal today. I mean, back in the day, it was, you know, 15 to 20% cash on cash, but we've gotten a lot harder. But like, is that we're looking similar? Like, you know, high single digit cash on cash, maybe, you know, 50, I don't know. Like, what are we seeing?
It certainly can be. It can often be higher.
Okay.
Depending on which strategy you're utilizing. So the great thing about commercial real estate, you know, cap rates are very easy to understand.
Yeah.
A cap rate is basically the cash on cash percentage return that you would get if you paid all cash for that deal. So if it's a 5% cap rate, if you paid all cash for that deal, you're going to get a 5% cash on cash return.
I'm glad you explained it that way, because a lot of people explain it in a much more complicated way. And I'm like, why don't we just call it that? Because that's what it is.
It's very easy to understand.
Yeah. People make it way more complicated than that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of little nuances like, closing costs.
Yeah,
and
CapEx maybe.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's basically what it is, right? And so, I mean, you know, you'll see a Dollar General 5% cap rate, right? That's all on the low end, but that's a stabilized deal. It's probably a 15-year lease. You don't have to do anything. It's mailbox money, right? And so, it's probably not going to be better than the stock market, but you also get the depreciation. You get the value of the real estate. There's some additional benefits to it. Then you have more of your value add real estate, right? And when we syndicate deals, we're typically aiming for an 18 to 22% internal rate of return.
Okay,
which gets very complicated. We probably won't be able to explain that on the podcast. But basically what that ends up being over a 5-year period is a 20% annualized cash on cash return. So you're not going to get 20% cash year one. You're not going to get it year 2. But by the time that we sell it and you divide that out over the 5-year investment period, you will have basically made 20% on your money every year. So that's what we aim for on the value add side. And then on development, it's riskier. So you've got to push it even higher. You've got to be getting 25% plus IRRs.
All right, yeah, that's pretty similar to what we do on the. I mean, again, I do commercial real estate too. So
Yeah.
on the mobile home park side, self-storage, we're doing the same kind of stuff. And it's hard to find those. It's not like those are everywhere, right? We submit 100 offers for every one we probably actually get.
They're tough.
Yeah, they're tough, and it's a tough time right now. Have you found much luck yourself or with clients going off market, like sending direct mail letters? Is that a thing that still works?
I love going off market.
Okay.
I mean, all of the things that people do in residential real estate also work in commercial, but no one does them.
Yeah.
You think about how many homeowners get like the,
Yeah, the
oh,
letters.
we'll buy
Yep.
your home, we'll buy your home, whatever. No one gets that in commercial real estate.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be the one person in your market that says, okay, I do know that I want to buy any office building between 10 and 20,000 square feet in these 5 zip codes, you can go to your local tax records, pull every building in that market that fits that, and start hitting with mailers.
Yeah.
It's tough to cold call because often they're in LLCs that might go to an attorney and you just can't figure that out.
Yeah.
But the mailing address goes to exactly who that letter needs to go to.
Yeah.
So I love sending letters. I bought a little retail building down the street from here, like actually really around the corner, because of a letter that we sent during COVID.
That's cool.
And we got a great deal on it. I bought it for $435 and it appraised for $650.
Yeah.
I love doing off-market deals.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
I love it, man. All right, well, we got to start shifting toward the end of the show, so I got a few more questions for you. The next segment's called the 3-2-1 pivot. The idea of a pivot is your life is moving one direction and it changes a little bit because something changed it. So there are 3 pivot books I'd love to have you name, 2 pivot people in your life, and 1 pivot quote. So let's start with the books. 3 books that have changed your life a little bit.
Yeah, the books. Walkable City by Jeff
Okay.
Speck.
Okay.
That's probably not typically on everybody's top
I've not
3.
had that one named.
But man, that book completely changed how I look at how cities are designed.
Okay.
Before then, I thought that bike lanes and bigger sidewalks and medians and all this kind of stuff were kind of a waste of time and just a problem.
Bunch of liberals.
Yeah,
What
what are these people doing? We don't need more trees. But now I look at it, I'm like, man, it actually makes the area so much nicer. Like you look at 12th Avenue South and here in Nashville, which is a very popular neighborhood. Before, it was a drive-through area. I mean, cars were speeding past. There was nothing there. As soon as they instituted traffic calming, it became the most expensive real estate in Nashville.
Interesting, yeah.
Because everybody wanted to live there.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to walk there. Pretty great.
Very cool. Okay, Walkable City.
Walkable City is definitely up there. Man, I'm trying to think of what some of the other books that so here's the thing. I've got like 1,000 books in my library, and it's always so tough to pick one.
I know it is.
I mean, would it be weird if I said BRRR by Brandon Turner?
well, it depends on if you want. So David Green technically wrote the original BRRR.
Okay.
I wrote Rental Property Investing, so you can say it if you wanted to. I'll take it.
Well, let's throw them both in there.
Okay, we're doing
those
both.
are great because I actually ended up. And I love this. I took the BRRR method and just 100% applied it to commercial real estate.
I love it. Yeah, it does work there. It works there perfectly.
It
yeah.
works every single time. And this is probably a cop out, but Rich Dad Poor Dad.
It's
mean,
great.
come on, man. That's
I
such
know.
a good
you can't
book.
not say.
I don't know that I agree with anything that Robert Kiyosaki is doing nowadays, but man, what a great book.
Dude.
And just the analogies that he uses in it to make everything so easily understood by anyone is, there's some brilliance in that.
I love it, man. All great books. Walkable City, though, I have not read, so I'm going to pick that one up right away.
Highly recommend it.
How about people? 2 people have changed your life a little bit.
So my grandfather,
Okay.
because every year since I was 12, I would work for him in the summers, and he taught me the value of hard work. And he also was a real estate investor. He's still around.
Yeah.
So when I say was, it's not like he's still around. He just stopped buying real estate. So I got a lot of really early experience going out and working on rental properties for him.
No,
He
that's cool.
did a bunch of single families, but the best thing he ever did was buy the building that his company occupied, because now he rents that out. He's probably making $20,000, $30,000 a month off of that, and that's his retirement.
That's great.
It's the greatest thing ever. Talk about an education,
Yeah, that's cool.
right? The other person is actually my current mentor. His name's Michael Burcham.
Okay.
He's a professor here at Vanderbilt University, and he taught a class. He actually just retired from teaching it this past year, called Catalyst for the Entrepreneurs Organization. And I took it the first year that I founded the Cobble Group. And we went from, I think we did probably $250,000 in income that year. By the time I finished the class 12 months later, we were over $1 million.
Wow.
And it was because he basically took his Vanderbilt MBA, condensed it into these micro sessions for entrepreneurs, and taught it for like, I want to say it was like $3,000.
That's awesome.
It was nothing. And so now he's been a mentor of mine ever since. And I mean, talk about just a brilliant business mind.
I feel like you should help him put these into a course, and you can sell that and make a bunch of money online.
So he already is.
Oh, okay. Well,
So he's got, he started recently doing that because I started talking to him about doing courses. And so he's got this whole learning system. That's amazing.
Awesome. I love it, man. All right. One quote that's pivoted your life.
So I'm not going to be able to say the whole quote,
Okay.
but it's the man in the arena.
Oh, dude, I love it. I have it hanging on my wall.
Dude, hands down. I mean, whenever I'm feeling like in a bad spot, which happens all the time in real estate. I mean, dude, we're bipolar, right?
Yeah,
It's the
ups and
roller
downs,
coaster
yeah.
of emotions, man. It's no one can judge the man that's sitting in there taking the punches.
Yep. Yeah.
If you're not sitting in there, if
Yeah.
you're just sitting there watching,
Yep.
you can't judge
You're
that.
just a spectator.
You don't know what it's like.
Yeah. So good.
So I love that quote.
All right. Past, present, future. Some quick fire questions at you. Number one, advice to your younger self.
Drop out of high school and buy real estate in 2008.
That's not bad advice. What's like a habit or action you've instituted in your life in the past year that's just made your life a little better?
I stopped drinking back in June.
Stop drinking. Why'd you stop drinking?
Man, it wasn't like I had a problem.
Yep.
It wasn't like I necessarily even wanted to stop drinking. We were just up in New York for a buddy's engagement, and everybody wanted to start drinking at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I was like, okay, well, you basically have two options at that point, right? You either keep drinking for the long haul
Yep.
in order to keep this party going, or you go home and take a nap. And when you're in New York, neither of those things sound fun. So I actually found a non-alcoholic beer on the menu called Athletic Brewing, which has blown up.
Yeah, so good.
It's so good. It's better than most beers I've had.
Yeah.
And we just ended up drinking non-alcoholic beer the entire weekend because my girlfriend and I woke up the next morning at 7 a.m.
And felt
and we
great.
went and like partied,
Yeah.
just went and saw the sights in New York City while all of our friends were sleeping.
Yep.
And then repeated again the next day. And we're like, this is great. We had like twice the experience that everybody else did on this trip.
Yeah.
So
That's beautiful, man. I stopped drinking, a little over a month ago, and my life is definitively better because of it. So
100%.
yeah. Legacy. What do you want your legacy to be? In other words, when your loved ones are gathered around your tombstone or your casket at the end of your life, what are they saying about you?
I would like for them to say something along the lines of he gave his all for his community. I'm from Nashville.
Yeah.
I still live in Nashville. I moved to the other side of town, so I like to say, I moved away without having to move away because East Nashville is so different from where I grew up, which is really cool, but it's only 20 minutes away. And I love working with small businesses. So they are the fabric of the character of all of our neighborhoods. In East Nashville, you can tell just by spending a little time here, it has so much just organic character here.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a part of Nashville called Green Hills, which used to have that. It's where Bluebird Cafe is, right? Yeah. Corner pub, some really cool small local spots. But over the years, the corporate businesses took over, and it just lost that shimmer.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working to do with every single commercial real estate project that we do is how can we serve small business owners so that they can then serve the community?
Yeah, I'm a super, super big fan of helping that. I don't know if you call it demographics, maybe the wrong word, but that like niche of like the small entrepreneur, because I want them to thrive. Like I want to help them thrive. And obviously I help a lot of real estate investors, but I'm just as passionate as like, oh, you run a small little like art studio? Great. Let's get your books in order so that you can actually pay your bills and stay in business for year after year after year.
I think it's way more impressive to do that kind of stuff, man, than it is to run like, a 1,000-person insurance company. Like, I mean, it is tough to say, you know what? I love making art. I'm going to go start a business around this and do a studio and sell it to people.
Yeah. All right, man. 2 more questions and we'll wrap up. What are you excited for, first of all?
2024. I mean, we're recording this in early January, so looking forward to the year. I've completely restructured the way that I work, which I'm really excited about. I'm going to be focusing more on the YouTube channel, and my team is going to be handling most of, if not all of the brokerage.
Awesome.
So I'm going to kind of step away from that, and we'll see what my schedule looks like this year.
Where can people find you and connect with you and learn from you?
Definitely on YouTube.
All right.
Just at Tyler Cauble.
Okay.
If you want to follow more of the day-to-day, check me out on Instagram at commercial in Nashville with underscores in there, and tylercauble.com.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you, Brendan. Thanks, man.
And that, my people, is the show. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the insights from the episode. And hey, before you go, if you enjoyed this episode or you enjoy the show in general, please consider leaving us a rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We really do value your feedback, and we read your comments to make future decisions about topics and guests and everything else. Plus, it helps us reach more people the more reviews we have. And last but not least, please head over to social media and consider friending, following, subscribing, and all that stuff to both Better Life at Better Life over on Instagram and my own personal at Beardy Brandon for more. That's Beardy with a Y at the end of it, Beard with a Y, Brandon on YouTube, Instagram, everywhere else. Thanks again for listening. I am honored that you would bring me along on your journey to building wealth without losing your soul. This show has been a production of the Better Life Tribe, copyright 2024. Our producer is Kevin Leahy with Podcast Point Man. Our videographer and all-around talented video guy, Carson Smith. My co-host is the amazing Cam Cathcart with DealFlowRealEstate.com. And finally, this show has been all about living a better life. But if you want my spiritual answer to what it takes to live not only a better life, but the best life, head over to abetterlife.com/best life. I got a 13-minute special video for you there. For the Better Life Tribe, my name is Brandon Turner, signing off.